Some betrayals don't happen in the dark. They are performed in public, under the bright lights of a luxury restaurant. This is the story of a calculated public cruelty of a husband who looked a waitress in the eye and, referring to the woman carrying his children, said, "Don't serve her. She's just the surrogate." He believed it was the final move in his secret plan, a quiet dismissal before he disappeared to start a new life. He never imagined his wife, the brilliant doctor he had so foolishly underestimated, was about to walk through that very door, pushing a stroller with the twins he had no idea were already born. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a masterclass in whole justice. Dr. Evelyn Hayes had a life that looked like a perfectly curated magazine spread. Her sprawling home in a leafy Austin, Texas suburb, with its gleaming hardwood floors and floor-to-ceiling windows, was a testament to her success as a leading obstetrician at St. David's Medical Center. She spent her days surrounded by the miracle of new life. She held the hands of anxious mothers, calmed the fears of first-time fathers, and her skilled hands were often the first to welcome a new soul into the world. Her colleagues respected her, her patients adored her, and her husband, Mark Thompson, seemed to worship the ground she walked on. Mark was the other half of their golden couple image, a charismatic financial advisor with a portfolio of high-net-worth clients. He was handsome, attentive, and unfailingly supportive of Evelyn's demanding career. He'd be the one to have a gourmet dinner waiting when she came home late after a difficult delivery, a glass of her favorite Cabernet Sauvignon, already poured. He managed their finances with what she believed was meticulous care, assuring her their future was as bright and secure as their present. But beneath the polished surface of their life, a quiet, persistent ache throbbed. The one thing Evelyn's medical expertise and Mark's unwavering support couldn't grant them was a child of their own. Their journey had begun with optimism, a natural extension of their love. But a year turned into 2, then 5. The casual attempts gave way to the cold, sterile world of fertility clinics. Evelyn, the accomplished doctor, became just another patient, subjected to the same invasive tests, the same hormonal roller coasters, the same crushing disappointments she witnessed in her own practice. They went through 3 rounds of IVF, each one a universe of hope that collapsed into a black hole of grief. The final diagnosis was a gut-punch, unexplained infertility, a cruel medical shrug. It was Evelyn who finally tearfully uttered the word surrogacy. Mark was hesitant at first, or so he seemed. "Are you sure, Ev? It's a lot. Another person involved in something so intimate. Mark, I need this," she had whispered one night, her voice raw after another friend's baby announcement. "I need to be a mother. I see it every single day. I feel it in my bones. If this is the only way..." He held her, then stroking her hair. "Okay, honey. If this is what you need, then it's what we'll do. We're a team. We'll build our family no matter what it takes." The agency they chose was reputable, expensive, and thorough. It led them to Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was 28, a single mother to a bright 7-year-old boy named Leo. She worked as a teaching assistant, and her profile radiated a warmth and stability that instantly appealed to Evelyn. In their first video call, Sarah was nervous but direct. "I want to be clear about why I'm doing this," Sarah said, her hands clasped on the table in her small, tidy apartment. "My mum has early onset Alzheimer's. The care facility that can give her what she needs is... well, it's beyond my means. This compensation would change her life." And she added a genuine smile touching her lips. I love being pregnant. It was the happiest time of my life. The thought of being able to give that gift to someone who wants it so badly. It feels right." Evelyn's heart swelled with gratitude. She saw not a transaction but a partnership. Mark handled the financial and legal arrangements with his characteristic efficiency, setting up a trust for the payments and ensuring the contracts were ironclad. He called it the project, a term that made Evelyn flinch slightly, but she chalked it up to his business-oriented mind. The embryo transfer was successful on the first attempt. And then at the 6-week scan came the news that left them all breathless twins. Evelyn sobbed with joy, clutching Mark's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. 2 heartbeats, 2 tiny flickering lights on the screen. It was more than she had ever dared to dream. Mark was ecstatic, scooping her up in a hug and laughing. 2 for the price of 1. Ev, we hit the jackpot. It was a clumsy joke, but Evelyn, blinded by happiness, let it slide. They were going to be a family, a big, noisy, wonderful family. The first few months of the pregnancy were a blissful blur. Evelyn insisted on being Sarah's primary point of contact, texting her daily, asking about her symptoms, and sending care packages filled with comfortable maternity wear, prenatal vitamins, and organic snacks. She attended every doctor's appointment, her eyes welling up each time she saw her babies growing on the ultrasound monitor. She was the doctor, but in those moments, she was just the mother. Mark was supportive, but in a more detached way. He'd ask for the status report after each appointment. When Sarah experienced morning sickness, he sent a text. "Hope you're managing. Remember to stay hydrated for the babies." It was practical, not personal. Evelyn told herself it was just his way of coping with the lack of control, the fact that this monumental event was happening in someone else's body. As Sarah's belly swelled, so did Mark's controlling nature. The suggestions became directives. He sent Sarah a detailed list of approved foods, citing articles on fetal development. He questioned a weekend trip she planned to take to see her family, asking if the long car ride was advisable. "He's just anxious," Evelyn would tell her sister Jessica over the phone. "He wants everything to be perfect." Jessica, ever the pragmatist, was less convinced. Anxious or controlling, Ev? There's a fine line. He talks about Sarah like she's a high-end incubator. He's leased. Jess, that's not fair. Evelyn defended him, a knot tightening in her stomach. He's just processing this differently. He's all about protecting his investment. They're not an investment, Evelyn. They're your children. And Sarah is a human being, not a piece of equipment. Evelyn ended the call feeling defensive, but Jessica's words lingered. She started noticing things. The way Mark's jaw would clench when Sarah mentioned feeling tired. The time he'd referred to the nursery they were building as my legacy wing. Small things, tiny cracks in the perfect facade. But they were there. The baby shower was Evelyn's domain. She hosted it in their beautiful backyard, a sea of pastel balloons and delicate white roses. Sarah was the guest of honor, looking radiant in a blue maxi dress Evelyn had bought for her. Evelyn showered her with gifts, not just for the babies, but for her, a spa gift certificate, a cozy robe, a subscription box for new mothers. For when you need to recover and reclaim your own body, Evelyn whispered to her, squeezing her hand. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Evelyn. You've been incredible. Mark mingled with the guests, accepting congratulations with a proud smile. He presented Sarah with a gift himself, a brand new top-of-the-line tablet. So you can keep us updated in real time, he announced to the room. And I've preloaded it with educational apps and classical music for the babies to listen to." The guests murmured in approval at his thoughtfulness. But Evelyn saw the look on Sarah's face, a flicker of discomfort at the public performative nature of the gift. It felt less like a present and more like another tool of surveillance. Later that evening, after everyone had left, Evelyn found a discrepancy while balancing her checkbook online. A charge for $800 at a high-end jewelry store, Rossi Fine Jewels. She didn't recognize it. "Mark," she called out. Her brow furrowed. "Did you buy some jewelry recently?" "There's a charge here from a place called Rossi's." He walked in, unbuttoning his shirt. He didn't miss a beat. "Oh, right. That was a client gift. Robert Henderson for his wife. Landed the Henderson tech account. It's huge. Had to send something impressive." It made sense. It was logical. Evelyn clicked the laptop shut, the unease dissipating. He was a good man. He was a thoughtful husband. She was just being paranoid, letting Jessica's cynicism get to her. She was 34 weeks pregnant, in a sense. Her babies were safe. Her husband loved her. Their perfect life was just on the horizon. She chose to ignore the cracks, unaware that the entire foundation was about to crumble. The final weeks of the surrogacy were a crescendo of anxiety and anticipation. The nursery was complete, 2 pristine white cribs standing side by side, a mobile of fluffy sheep dangling above them. Evelyn spent her evenings in there, folding tiny onesies. Her heart, a tangled mess of hope and a fear so profound it was almost paralyzing. What if something went wrong? What if she couldn't bond with them? Mark's behavior grew more erratic. The late nights at the office became more frequent. He'd come home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't Evelyn's, a scent he'd quickly cover by heading straight for the shower. When she asked, he'd blame it on a client dinner or a networking event. You know how it is, Ev. People hug, they get close. It's the business world. He became obsessed with the birth plan. He drafted a multi-page document detailing everything from the route to the hospital to who was allowed in the delivery room. He designated himself as the primary decision-maker, with Evelyn as the secondary. "Mark, this is insane," Evelyn said, scanning the document. "I'm an obstetrician. I think I know how a delivery works. And Sarah has a say in this too. It's her body. It's my baby's," he retorted, his voice sharp. "I'm not leaving anything to chance. Sarah's job is to deliver the product safely. My job is to manage the process." The word product struck Evelyn like a physical blow. They are not a product, Mark. They are our children. It's semantics, Evelyn. "Don't get emotional," he said, dismissively, turning back to his laptop. The conversation was over. It was Sarah who first felt the chill of Mark's true nature. He started calling her multiple times a day, his tone no longer friendly but demanding. One afternoon he called while she was at the park with her son Leo. "Where are you?" "I can hear wind," he demanded. "I'm at the park with my son Mark. He had a half day at school." "A park? Is it clean? Are you overexerting yourself? You shouldn't be walking so much. The doctor said you need to rest." "Mark, I'm sitting on a bench watching my child play. I'm fine. I think I know my own limits." "I'm not so sure you do," he muttered just before hanging up. The call left Sarah shaken. The partnership she had entered into with such hope was beginning to feel like a prison. She felt like a vessel, a piece of property. Her only solace was Evelyn, whose texts were always kind and respectful, always asking about her, not just the babies. The first major tremor happened 2 weeks before the scheduled C-section. Sarah called Evelyn, her voice trembling. "Evelyn, I'm sorry to bother you, but something strange just happened." Mark came by the apartment. Evelyn's blood ran cold. He came by. Why, he was supposed to be in a meeting downtown. He said he needed me to sign some updated legal forms from the lawyer. But they were weird. It was an addendum, something about postnatal contact. It basically said I would have no contact with you or the babies after the birth, and any attempt to initiate contact would be a breach of contract with severe financial penalties. What Evelyn was stunned. We never discussed that. Our agreement allows for photos and yearly updates. I promised you that. I know, Sarah said, her voice small. I told him that, and he got angry. He said you were too emotional, and that he was handling the exit strategy. He said it was for the best to ensure a clean break. Evelyn. He scared me. He kept staring at my stomach and talking about his son. His son, Evelyn repeated, confused. You mean his children? No. He kept saying my son. He asked if the boy was still positioned on the left side. It was so specific, so odd. I refused to sign it, and he stormed out. Evelyn hung up the phone, her hands shaking. His son? The baby boy was indeed on the left. The girl was on the right. Why would he fixate on the boy? And an exit strategy. It sounded like a corporate takeover, not the birth of a family. The lie about the meeting downtown was a glaring red flag she could no longer ignore. That night, when Mark was in the shower, Evelyn did something she had never done before. She went into his office and opened his laptop. It was password protected, but she knew the password, or thought she did. Evelyn and Mark forever. Access denied. She tried their anniversary. Denied. She tried the baby's due date. Denied. Her heart pounded in her chest. On a whim, driven by a sickening suspicion, she typed in a name from the past, a name Mark hadn't mentioned in years. Isabella 1. Access granted. The screen opened to his email. The world tilted on its axis. Isabella. Isabella Rossi. Mark's college girlfriend, the fiery, ambitious artist he'd dated before her. The one he'd always described with a wistful laugh as the one that got away. The emails were a year's worth of a hidden life. Passionate exchanges, plans for secret meetings, complaints about his cold, career-obsessed wife. But it was the more recent messages that made Evelyn feel like she was going to be sick. From Isabella. Is the plan still on, my love? I've found the most perfect little house in Santa Fe. I can just picture you and me and our little boy starting over. From Mark. The plan is firmly in motion. The asset is almost mature. Just a few more weeks of dealing with the carrier and my wife's incessant emotional drama. The doctor thinks she has everything under control, but she has no idea what's coming. I've already moved a significant portion of our liquid assets to an offshore account she can't touch. By the time she figures it out, we'll be gone. You, me, and our son. James. I've decided to name him James. James. The boy. The asset. The carrier. Evelyn stumbled back from the desk, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a sob. It wasn't just an affair. It was a conspiracy. He wasn't just cheating on her. He was planning to steal her money, steal her son and disappear. He was going to leave her with her daughter and a shattered life, likely framing it as a tragic loss, one twin not making it. The jewelry store, Rossi Fine Jewels, it hadn't been a client gift. It had been for Isabella Rossi. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. His obsession with the boy, the legal form to silence Sarah, his control over the finances. Her world wasn't just cracking. It had been built on a foundation of lies that was now dissolving into sand. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The air in the opulent house felt thick and suffocating. The nursery down the hall seemed like a cruel joke. She wanted to scream, to smash everything, to confront him as he walked out of the shower. But then the doctor in her took over. The cool, methodical mind that assessed a crisis and formulated a plan. Screaming would get her nowhere. He would lie, gaslight her, and accelerate his plan. He had called her emotional predictable. She would be the opposite. She would be clinical. She would be strategic. He had started this war, but she, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, was going to finish it. She wiped her tears, her grief solidifying into a cold, hard diamond of fury. She took out her phone and made 2 calls. The first was to her sister Jessica. "Jess," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I need your help. Bring a bag. We have to go to the hospital, and I need you to find me the best divorce lawyer in Texas." The second call was to Sarah. "Sarah, it's Evelyn. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Pack a bag for yourself and Leo. I'm sending a car for you in 30 minutes. You're coming to the hospital. Your C-section is happening tonight." The game had changed. Mark thought he was the puppet master, but he had underestimated the 2 women he was trying to destroy, and he had no idea that the curtain was about to rise on the final act, not in a hospital room, but in a place so public his ruin would be absolute. The 2 days that followed were a masterclass in deception, orchestrated by a woman, fueled by adrenaline and righteous fury. At St. David's, Evelyn was in her element. She leveraged every ounce of her professional authority. She called in her most trusted colleague, Dr. Miller, and explained a redacted version of the truth. "There's a severe and credible threat to the children's safety from their father. I need to move up the delivery, and I need it done quietly." No one questioned Dr. Hayes. Sarah was admitted under a different name, placed in a private wing, with restricted access. Jessica stayed with her, a loyal sentinel, while Evelyn put the rest of her plan in motion. The C-section was smooth and flawless. At 11:42 p.m., a beautiful, healthy baby girl, Amelia, was born. 2 minutes later, her brother James arrived, his cry lusty and strong. Evelyn held them both, tears streaming down her face. But these were not the tears of pure joy she had imagined. They were tears of fierce, primal protection. She looked at these 2 perfect beings, her daughter and her son, and the cold diamond of her fury hardened. He would not have them. He would not break them apart. While Sarah recovered, Evelyn and Jessica became the baby's guardians. They fed them, changed them, and held them close in a secure room in the neonatal unit. Evelyn, using her own resources, hired a private security guard to station outside the wing. Meanwhile, she played the part of the anxious, expectant mother to Mark. He called her, his voice a mask of concern. "Any news from the carrier?" he'd ask. "No, everything's quiet." Evelyn would reply, her voice steady, as she looked at her sleeping son. "Just waiting. I'm getting so nervous. Don't worry, honey, I'm handling it." Just a few more days, he'd soothe the condescension dripping from his words. He had no idea the babies were already born. He had no idea Sarah was safely tucked away, having already signed an affidavit with a lawyer Jessica had found detailing Mark's coercion and his disturbing fixation on the male twin. He had no idea Evelyn had already been in contact with a forensic accountant who was gleefully uncovering the web of offshore accounts and illicit transfers. The trap was set. Now all Evelyn needed was the stage, and Mark, in his infinite arrogance, provided it himself. 2 days after the birth, he sent a text, going to meet with Sarah to give her the final payment and have her sign the last of the paperwork. A public place is best for these things. The Four Seasons restaurant, 2 p.m. Just tying up loose ends before our family can begin. You should take a spa day, relax. Evelyn's smile was grim. Perfect. He was going to dismiss the woman who gave him his children, cut her off, and then proceed with his plan to steal one of them. The public setting was meant to intimidate Sarah to perform his power one last time. He didn't know it was going to be the stage for his own downfall. Evelyn got ready with meticulous care. She chose a steel-grey power suit, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She looked less like a new mother and more like a CEO about to execute a hostile takeover. Jessica was with her, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "Are you sure you can do this?" Evelyn looked at her sister in the mirror, her own eyes like chips of ice. "He built this life on a lie. I'm just going to tell the truth, loudly." She had arranged for Sarah to be there. Sarah, still recovering but resolute, agreed without hesitation. She deserved to see this through. She would arrive 10 minutes before Mark and sit at a secluded table, waiting for her cue. At 1:50 p.m., Evelyn and Jessica walked out of St. David's Medical Center. Evelyn was not empty-handed. She pushed a state-of-the-art double stroller, a beautiful, ridiculously expensive model Mark had insisted on buying. Tucked securely inside, swaddled in soft blue and pink blankets, were James and Amelia. They were the bombshells she was about to detonate. The restaurant at the Four Seasons was an oasis of hushed elegance. Soft piano music trickled through the air, mingling with the clink of silverware on fine china. Businessmen in tailored suits and ladies who lunch occupied the plush banquettes. Mark was already there, seated at a prime table. And he wasn't alone. Across from him, sipping a glass of champagne, was Isabella Rossi. Her fiery red hair was a stark contrast to the muted tones of the restaurant. She was laughing at something Mark had said, her hand resting intimately on his. At a small table near the back, Sarah watched them, her heart pounding. She had arrived as planned and ordered a water. Now she was playing her part. She stood up and walked towards Mark's table, her expression one of polite confusion. "Mark?" she said, her voice just loud enough to be heard by the surrounding tables. "I'm here for our meeting." Mark looked up, his smile vanishing. Annoyance flickered in his eyes. He hadn't expected her to approach him while he was with Isabella. He stood up, a gesture meant to be dismissive, to block her from the table. "Sarah, I'll be with you in a moment." "Go wait by the bar," he said in a low, sharp tone. Sarah stood her ground. "The hostess said you were at this table." "I just thought—" Isabella looked from Mark to Sarah, her perfectly arched eyebrows raising in question. "Mark, darling." "Who is this Mark?" Let out an exasperated sigh, his face a mask of patronizing charm for Isabella's benefit. He gestured vaguely at Sarah. "It's nobody. She's just the surrogate." He then turned to the approaching waitress, a young woman named Chloe, with a name tag pinned to her crisp white shirt. Mark didn't even look at her. He waved a dismissive hand toward Sarah. "Don't serve her," he said, his voice carrying an unmistakable air of command and contempt. "She's just the surrogate. She won't be needing anything." The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. The waitress froze, her eyes wide with shock. The couple at the next table stopped their conversation. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The public humiliation, the sheer cruelty of being rendered invisible, of being reduced to a function after everything she had been through, was staggering. She felt small, worthless, exactly as he intended her to feel. Isabella looked at Sarah's still recovering postpartum body, then back at Mark, a slow, dawning comprehension on her face. The surrogate Mark. What is this? But Mark never got to answer, because at that exact moment, the grand entrance of the restaurant opened, and in walked Dr. Evelyn Hayes. She was a vision of cold, righteous power. Her heels clicked with purpose on the marble floor. She wasn't crying. She wasn't hysterical. Her face was a placid mask of control. Pushed before her was the double stroller, a symbol of a reality Mark had no idea existed. She was followed closely by her sister Jessica, whose phone was held up discreetly, recording everything. Evelyn navigated through the tables, her eyes locked on her husband. A ripple of confusion went through the room. Who was this formidable woman? Mark's head snapped towards the entrance. His jaw dropped. The color drained from his face, replaced by a ghastly, sallow panic. He looked at Evelyn, then at the stroller, then back at Evelyn. His mind, usually so quick, couldn't process the scene. It was impossible. Evelyn reached the table. She didn't look at Sarah, not yet. She didn't look at the waitress. Her gaze was fixed entirely on the two people seated before her. She stopped the stroller right beside Isabella, giving her a perfect view of the two sleeping infants inside. She offered a smile that was all teeth. It was terrifying. Isabella Evelyn said, her voice dangerously calm. "It's been a long time. I see you've met my husband." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And Mark, darling?" she continued, turning her icy gaze on him. "I see you're busy with your exit strategy." Mark was sputtering, trying to form words to regain control of a situation that was spiraling into a nightmare. "Evelyn? What? How?" "But I have to correct you on one small point," Evelyn went on, her voice rising just enough to capture the attention of the entire now silent restaurant. She gestured gracefully towards the brave, shaken woman standing beside the table. "You told the waitress not to serve her. You called her just the surrogate." Evelyn took a step closer, her eyes blazing. "This woman's name is Sarah Jenkins. She is not an object. She is not a carrier. She is the magnificent, selfless woman who carried my children, my son James, and my daughter Amelia." She pointedly looked at the two babies in the stroller, then back at a stunned Isabella. Both of them, she said, her voice ringing with clarity. Alive, healthy, and with their mother. She placed a firm, protective hand on her own chest. Me. The performance was over. The truth had been delivered. And the fallout was just beginning. The silence in the restaurant was absolute, a vacuum created by the implosion of Mark Thompson's life. Every eye was on their table, a tableau of betrayal and shock. Mark stared at the two babies, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. His plan, his meticulous, cruel plan, had been discovered and dismantled with surgical precision. Isabella Rossi was the first to break the spell. She looked from Mark's ashen face to the two infants, then to Evelyn's unyielding expression. The beautiful house in Santa Fe, the fantasy of a new life with a stolen baby, it all curdled in her stomach. "Our son," she whispered, her voice trembling with dawning revulsion. She turned on Mark. "You told me she couldn't carry a child. You told me the surrogate was for us. You said the other one wasn't viable." Mark flinched as if struck. "Isabella, listen to me." "No," she said, standing up so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She looked at Evelyn, her eyes filled not with malice, but with a strange, horrified pity. "I knew he was leaving his wife. I didn't know he was a monster." She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking. "Don't you ever contact me again," she hissed at Mark before practically fleeing the restaurant, leaving him alone to face the wreckage. Now Evelyn's full attention was on her husband. How Mark stammered his voice a pathetic croak. "How did you know?" "You underestimated me," Evelyn said, simply, her voice low and cutting. "You always have. You thought I was just the emotional, career-obsessed wife, too busy and too stupid to see the truth. But while you were planning your little getaway with my money and my son, I was doing my own work." She ticked off the points on her fingers, her voice clear and methodical like a doctor delivering a fatal diagnosis. "First, the finances. That jewelry you bought for your mistress, I found it. Then I hired a forensic accountant. He found the offshore account, Mark, the one in the Cayman Islands. He found the nearly $2 million you siphoned from our joint assets and my personal investments over the past 18 months. It's all documented. The authorities will be very interested to see it." Mark's face went from pale to greenish. Embezzlement. It was a word he used for his clients, not for himself. "Second." Sarah Evelyn continued now, gesturing to the woman who stood beside her, no longer a victim, but a witness. "You tried to intimidate her. You tried to legally gag her. But you forgot that she has a conscience. She told me about your bizarre fixation on the male twin, about your attempts to coerce her into signing that disgusting addendum. Her lawyer has her sworn affidavit. You don't have one witness against you, Mark. You have two." She paused, letting him absorb the weight of his predicament. The surrounding diners were shamelessly listening, their lunches forgotten. This was better than any soap opera. Jessica's phone remained steady, capturing every incriminating second. And finally, Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, filled with all the pain he had caused her. "You thought you could break me by taking my son. You were going to tell me he died, weren't you? You were going to let me grieve for a child that was alive and well, living with you and that woman. You were going to leave me with my daughter Amelia, and hope I'd be too shattered to ever look deeper." She leaned in closer, her face inches from his. "Did you ever for 1 second stop to think about what that would do to a person? To the mother of your children? Or was I just collateral damage in the grand plan of Mark Thompson?" Mark had no answer. He could only stare, his world collapsing inward. The charm, the confidence, the arrogance, it had all been stripped away, leaving behind the small, pathetic man he truly was. Evelyn straightened up, her composure absolute. She turned to the stunned waitress Chloe, who was still standing nearby holding a water pitcher. Evelyn reached into her purse and pulled out a $100 bill. She pressed it into the young woman's hand. "I'm so sorry you had to witness that," she said kindly. "Please bring this woman," she said, placing a supportive hand on Sarah's arm. "Anything she wants from the menu. And a glass of your finest champagne. She has earned it." Then she turned back to her husband one last time. "The locks on the house have been changed. Your belongings are in trash bags on the curb. A restraining order will be served by the end of the day, ensuring you cannot come within 500 feet of me or my children. Your career, your reputation, that's for you to worry about. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, will be in touch with yours, if you even have one left after this." With that, she gave a slight nod to her sister. She turned the double stroller around, and with the same powerful, deliberate clicks of her heels, she walked away from the smouldering ruins of her marriage, leaving Mark Thompson utterly and completely destroyed in a room full of strangers. As she passed the bar on her way out, she saw Sarah had taken a seat. The waitress was already there, taking her order with a compassionate smile. Sarah looked up and met Evelyn's eyes. In that shared glance, a world of understanding passed between them. It wasn't just a victory for Evelyn. It was a victory for them both. An unspoken alliance had been forged in the fires of betrayal, a new unconventional family unit rising from the ashes of one man's deceit. Evelyn Hayes walked out into the bright Texas sun, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a mother and a woman who had just taken back her life. The aftermath of the spectacular implosion at the Four Seasons was not a whirlwind of chaotic emotion for Evelyn, but a period of methodical, chillingly calm demolition. The video Jessica had taken a silent, damning testament to Mark's public cruelty, and his panicked, sputtering confession was the legal equivalent of a nuclear weapon. Evelyn never had to face Mark again. Her lawyer, a formidable silver-haired man named Arthur Davies, handled everything. Davies convened a single meeting with Mark and his hastily assembled legal team. It was held in a sterile, wood-paneled conference room that felt like a funeral parlor. Evelyn was not present. She was at home, rocking her children. Davies, however, channeled her newfound steel. He didn't begin with pleasantries. He simply placed a tablet in the center of the vast mahogany table and pressed play. The video, silent and stark, played out. Mark's dismissive wave, the cruel words to the waitress, Isabella's horror, and Evelyn's grand, terrible entrance. They watched Mark's face crumble on screen, a real-time disintegration of a man who had lost control of his own narrative. When the video ended, Davies let the silence hang in the air for a full minute before speaking. That he said his voice quiet but carrying immense weight is the court of public opinion. It is also Exhibit A. He then slid a thick binder across the table. This is Exhibit B, a full forensic accounting report detailing the systematic embezzlement of $1.87 million from my client's personal and joint accounts into an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands, an entity, I might add, that lists Mr. Thompson as the sole beneficiary. He produced another binder. And this is Exhibit C, the sworn affidavit from Miss Sarah Jenkins detailing Mr. Thompson's campaign of coercion, his specific and disturbing fixation on the male infant, and his fraudulent attempt to alter a legal contract post facto to eliminate my client's contact with the gestational carrier. Mark's lawyers, who had likely taken the case assuming it was a standard, messy divorce, looked at their client with open disdain. Mark himself sat shrunken in his expensive suit, his face pale and clammy. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out, the arrogant shell removed to reveal nothing but weakness underneath. So here is what is going to happen. Davies continued his tone, leaving no room for negotiation. My client will not be pressing criminal charges for the embezzlement or the conspiracy to commit kidnapping. She has no desire for a protracted media circus that would affect her children. In return, Mr. Thompson will cede all claims to any and all marital assets, including the house. He will relinquish all parental rights immediately and irrevocably. His name will not appear on the birth certificates. He will agree to the permanent restraining order. He will walk away with the clothes on his back and the debts he has accrued. If any single point of this is contested, all 3 exhibits go directly to the district attorney's office and the Texas Medical Board. Are we in agreement? There was no argument. The fight was over before it began. Mark signed the papers with a trembling hand, his signature once a bold and confident scrawl, now a barely legible tremor. He walked out of that conference room, a non-entity erased from the life he had tried to viciously orchestrate. The whispers around Austin were immediate and brutal. The story in its juiciest, most dramatic form leaked from the restaurant staff and patrons. Mark Thompson wasn't just a cheat, he was a villain of operatic proportions. His clients abandoned him in droves. His firm fired him, citing a morals clause in his contract. He was socially and professionally radioactive. Within a month, he sold what few assets he had left, and vanished, rumored to have moved somewhere anonymous in the Midwest, a ghost haunted by the life he had torched so spectacularly. A week after the legal proceedings concluded, a thick cream envelope arrived for Evelyn. It was from Isabella Rossi's attorney. Inside was a typed formal letter of apology. Isabella claimed she was a pawn duped by a master manipulator. She wrote of her own struggles with infertility and how Mark had exploited that vulnerability, promising her the family she'd always craved. While my actions in participating in an affair were inexcusable, the letter read, "I hope you can believe that I was unaware of the truly monstrous nature of his plans for you and your children. I wish you and your beautiful family peace and healing." Evelyn read the letter twice. She felt no anger, no satisfaction, not even pity. She felt nothing at all. Isabella Rossi was a character from a different lifetime, a ghost from a story that was no longer hers. She folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and dropped it into the recycling bin without a second thought. That chapter was closed. Her focus was on the new life blooming within the walls of her home. The house, once so silent and pristine, was now a chaotic symphony of coos cries and the scent of baby powder. It was exhausting, overwhelming, and more wonderful than she had ever imagined. And at the center of this new world, an unexpected anchor had formed Sarah Jenkins. Evelyn had insisted Sarah take a full month to do nothing but recover all expenses paid. But after that month, she invited Sarah and Leo over for lunch. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken questions. They were no longer client and surrogate. What were they now? They sat in the sunny living room, the twins sleeping soundly in a bassinet nearby. Evelyn finally broke the silence. "Sarah, I've spent weeks trying to find the right words, and I've come to the conclusion that there are none. Thank you is too small. What you did for me, what you endured because of Mark. It's a debt I can never truly repay." Sarah, ever practical, shook her head. "Evelyn, you don't owe me anything. We both got out of a nightmare. And you've already given me the thing I wanted most, the security for my mom." "That was just the start," Evelyn said, leaning forward. "That was justice. This is about something else. This is about respect. Sarah, I have never met a person with more integrity or strength than you. What Mark did, trying to reduce you to a function, to an object, it was the most profound insult I have ever witnessed. I want to spend the rest of my life proving him wrong." She slid a folder across the coffee table. "I told you I set up a trust for your mother's care. It's done. She has a room at Oak Ridge waiting for her whenever you're ready. But this, she said, tapping the folder, is for you and Leo. I've spoken to an advisor. I want to set up a college fund for Leo, a substantial one. And for you, you mentioned once that you loved being a teaching assistant, but wished you could lead your own classroom. The University of Texas has one of the best education programs in the country. I want to pay for it. Your tuition, your books, a living stipend, so you can focus on your studies without financial worry. Sarah stared at the folder, her eyes wide with disbelief. She slowly shook her head, pushing it back towards Evelyn. I can't. Evelyn, it's too much. It feels like charity. I have my pride. I know you do, Evelyn said softly. That's why this isn't charity. This is an investment. I am investing in a brilliant, capable woman that I am proud to know. Think of it as a scholarship, the Dr. Evelyn Hayes Scholarship for Remarkable Women. You are its first and most deserving recipient. Please, Sarah, let me do this. Let this be part of the good that comes from the bad. Leo, who had been quietly playing with his action figures, seemed to sense the emotional weight in the room. He looked at the bassinet and then at his mom. Are James and Amelia going to know I was their tummy buddy's boy? He asked with the simple clarity of a child. The question broke the tension. A watery smile touched Sarah's lips. Evelyn's heart swelled. Yes, Leo. Evelyn said, her voice thick with emotion. They are absolutely going to know that. They're going to know you, and they're going to know your amazing mother for the rest of their lives, if you'll let us. Sarah finally looked up, tears shining in her eyes. She gave a small, shaky nod. Okay, Evelyn. Okay. That okay was the laying of a new foundation. Over the next year, the relationship blossomed into something beautiful and unique. Sarah wasn't just a friend. She was an integral part of their lives. She became Aunt Sarah, the one person who could soothe a colicky James when Evelyn was at her wits' end. She'd show up on a Tuesday night with takeout, having sensed from a text message that Evelyn was overwhelmed and would simply take one of the babies, allowing the exhausted doctor a moment to breathe. Evelyn, in turn, became Sarah's biggest cheerleader. She helped her with her university application proofreading essays and coaching her for the entrance interview. When Sarah was accepted, they celebrated with champagne, just as they had on that first day at the Four Seasons. But this time it was in Evelyn's kitchen, a toast to a future Sarah was building for herself. One brisk autumn afternoon, almost a year to the day of the incident, they were in the backyard. The twins, now babbling and crawling, were on a blanket on the grass. Leo was proudly showing them how to stack blocks. Evelyn and Sarah sat on the patio chairs watching. It's funny, Sarah said, her voice reflective. I remember being so scared that seeing them would hurt. A constant reminder of the pregnancy of Mark. Of everything. But it's not like that at all. What is it like? Evelyn asked gently. It feels like victory. Sarah said, a slow smile spreading across her face. Every time I see them smile, every time I see you with them so happy and so completely in your element, it feels like we won. We took the thing he tried to destroy and turned it into this. She gestured at the peaceful, happy scene before them. We did, Evelyn affirmed, reaching across to squeeze her hand. He thought he could isolate us, pit us against each other. He never imagined we would choose to stand together. She looked at her children, her heart full of a love so fierce and profound it eclipsed every memory of pain. I spent years dreaming of a perfect family. I had this image in my head, a loving husband, 2 kids, a beautiful house. The whole package. I got the kids and the house, but the life I have now, it's nothing like the one I dreamed of. She turned to Sarah, her eyes shining with gratitude. It's so much better. It's real. It's built on truth and respect, not on secrets and lies. He wasn't the missing piece of my life, Sarah. He was the obstacle to it. The old dream had died in the fire of Mark's betrayal. But from those ashes, something stronger and more authentic had grown. A family defined not by blood or by contract, but by choice, by courage, and by the unbreakable solidarity of 2 women who had faced the darkness together and walked out into the light, hand in hand. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a husband's betrayal. It was a story of a woman's incredible rebirth. Dr. Evelyn Hayes could have become a victim of her husband's cruelty, but she chose to become the architect of her own justice. She reminds us that true strength isn't the absence of pain, but the courage to fight through it, to protect what matters most, and to rebuild on your own terms. The most powerful twist wasn't the affair or the secret plot. It was the unexpected bond forged between Evelyn and Sarah. 2 women who turned a moment of shared trauma into a lifetime of shared family. Their story is a powerful testament to resilience, integrity, and the idea that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you thought you had. If Evelyn's story of strength and survival moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear a message of hope. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories that matter. What would you have done in Evelyn's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. A penthouse overlooking Central Park, a walk-in closet overflowing with Hermes, and a baby on the way. Anya had it all. Or so she thought. In the blink of an eye, her billionaire husband, a man who once promised her the world, stood before her, his words colder than the winter wind whipping across their panoramic window. I want a divorce. But before the ink could dry on the papers, a knock on the door changed everything. His mistress wasn't there to gloat. She was there to expose a secret so dark it would make his demand for a divorce the least of Anya's worries. The scent of blooming peonies and old money filled the air of the penthouse apartment on the 82nd floor of 432 Park Avenue. It was a sterile, curated scent, one that Anya had come to associate with her life, beautiful, expensive, and utterly devoid of the earthy reality she secretly craved. From this height, New York City was a glittering, silent diorama. The yellow cabs were ants, the sprawling green of Central Park, a manicured carpet, and the people, the millions of bustling, striving souls, were entirely insignificant, just like her. Anya traced the rim of her porcelain teacup, the delicate floral pattern a stark contrast to the stark minimalist decor Julian insisted upon. Everything was shades of grey chrome and glass. It was the home of a man who admired his reflections both literal and financial. He called it uncluttered. Anya called it empty. Her hand drifted down to the gentle swell of her stomach, a 6-month bump that was her only true possession in this sky-high palace. This baby, her baby, was the one vibrant, chaotic, and real thing in her life. It was a secret garden she nurtured within herself, a world away from Julian's meticulous control. Julian Croft. To the world, he was a titan of industry, a visionary in the volatile world of tech mergers and acquisitions. His face, all sharp angles and disarming smiles, graced the covers of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. He had a Midas touch, turning fledgling startups into billion-dollar unicorns with a flick of his pen. He had swept Anya off her feet 5 years ago. She was a junior art curator, then full of opinions and passion, and he had seemed utterly captivated by her spirit. He'd courted her with the kind of grand cinematic gestures that leave a woman breathless, a private viewing at the Met, a weekend trip to Paris, on a whim a rare first-edition book of poetry she'd once mentioned in passing. He had built a gilded cage for her, and she, dazzled by the shine, had walked right in. She'd given up her small gallery job, her cramped but cozy apartment in the village, and her circle of wonderfully messy artistic friends. Julian had said he wanted to give her the world. She hadn't realized he meant he wanted to become her entire world. The sound of the private elevator chiming its arrival pulled her from her reverie. Julian was home. Early. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach, a feeling that had become increasingly familiar over the past few months. He strode into the living area, looking every inch the master of the universe. His bespoke Tom Ford suit clung perfectly to his athletic frame, his dark hair was impeccably styled, and his face held the neutral, unreadable expression he reserved for high-stakes negotiations. He didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the panoramic view as if calculating its net worth. Julian Anya began, her voice softer than she intended. "You're home. I was just about to have the chef start on dinner." He turned then, and the coldness in his eyes extinguished the small flicker of hope in her chest. There was no warmth, no flicker of recognition for his pregnant wife. It was the look he gave a line item on a balance sheet that was underperforming. "Don't bother," he said, his voice flat and clipped. He walked over to the marble bar and poured himself a whiskey, the clink of the decanter against the glass unnaturally loud in the silent room. "We need to talk, Anya." Anya's hand instinctively went back to her belly, a protective gesture. "Is everything all right? Did the deal with the Japanese consortium fall through?" She tried to grasp for a familiar topic, a corner of his life she was still permitted to understand. He took a long swallow of his drink, his throat bobbing. "The deal is fine. Everything in my life is perfectly aligned. Except this." He gestured vaguely between them, an all-encompassing wave that dismissed their 5 years of marriage. Their shared bed, the child growing inside her. This, she whispered, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. This marriage, he stated, turning to face her fully. His face was a mask of detached finality. "It's run its course. It no longer serves its purpose. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, sharp and deadly, like shards of glass from the panoramic window he so admired. Anya felt the blood drain from her face. She must have misheard. This was Julian's idea of a joke, a cruel, power-playing jest to see her squirm. "A divorce," she stammered, a hysterical little laugh escaping her lips. "Julian, what are you talking about?" "I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." "I'm aware of the child's existence," he said, his voice laced with an icy patience that was more terrifying than any shout. "My lawyers have already been instructed to be generous. A trust will be established for the child. You will be provided with a settlement that will allow you to live very comfortably. A nice apartment, a staff, whatever you need. You will want for nothing materially." Materially. The word was an insult, a deliberate reduction of her life, her love, her very being to a transaction. The man who had once quoted poetry to her was now liquidating her like a bad asset. "I don't want a settlement, Julian. I want my husband. I want the father of my child." Her voice cracked the carefully constructed composure of the perfect wife, shattering into a million pieces. Tears streamed down her face, hot and furious. "What has happened to you? What has happened to us? Nothing has happened," he insisted, his calm unwavering. He was a stone wall, impervious to her pain. "This was always a contract, Anya. An arrangement. You provided beauty, social grace, a certain aesthetic. I provided a lifestyle beyond your wildest dreams. The contract is now being terminated." "A contract?" She stared at him aghast. The last 5 years replayed in her mind, now tainted and twisted by his cruel words. Every shared laugh, every tender touch, every whispered promise now felt like a lie, a performance. She felt a wave of nausea so profound it had nothing to do with her pregnancy. She had been a fool, a beautiful, well-kept, blind fool. There's someone else, isn't there? The question was a classic, a cliché she never thought she'd utter. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed his face. Not guilt, but a flicker of annoyance, as if she were a fly buzzing around his head. "That's irrelevant to the situation." "Irrelevant?" she cried, her voice rising. "You're throwing me out pregnant with your child, and you tell me your mistress is irrelevant. Who is she, Julian?" He walked over to the sleek obsidian desk in the corner and pulled a thick document from a leather briefcase. He tossed it onto the glass coffee table between them. The sound was a final, definitive thud. "These are the divorce papers," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "My lawyers advise you to sign them without contest. A prolonged, messy battle will not be beneficial for you, or for the public's perception of you. I have a reputation to maintain." He was threatening her. He was threatening to paint her as a gold digger, a shrew, to drag her name through the mud, while he stood pristine on his mountain of money. The cruelty was breathtaking. He wasn't just ending their marriage. He was trying to erase her, to control the very narrative of her existence, even as he expelled her from his. She looked from the papers to his cold, handsome face. The man she loved, or the man she thought she loved, was gone. In his place stood a monster, a creature of pure, unadulterated avarice and ego. A profound, chilling clarity washed over her. The shock receded, replaced by a nascent, unfamiliar anger. "No," she said, her voice trembling, but firm. Julian raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. No. I will not sign these. I will not be discarded like one of your failed investments." "This child," she said, her hand protectively cradling her belly, "deserves a father. And I deserve an explanation. A real one." Julian's jaw tightened. He was not used to being told no. The air crackled with his silent fury. He took a step towards her, his physical presence suddenly feeling overwhelming, threatening. "You are making a grave mistake, Anya," he hissed. "You have no idea what you're messing with. You have no idea the forces at play here. Sign the papers. Take the money. Disappear quietly. It's the best option for everyone." His words held a hidden weight, a darker undercurrent that went beyond a simple sordid affair. The forces at play here. It wasn't the plea of a man in love with someone else. It was a warning, a threat. Before Anya could respond, before she could decipher the strange, panicked glint in his eyes, the chime of the private elevator echoed through the penthouse once more. Both their heads snapped towards the sound. Julian's face, for the first time that evening, lost its composure. A flash of pure, unadulterated panic crossed his features so quick that Anya almost missed it. He looked trapped. "Who is that?" Anya asked, her own confusion mounting. They weren't expecting anyone. Julian guarded their privacy with a zeal that bordered on paranoid. "Don't." Julian breathed, his eyes wide, as he stared at the elevator doors. It wasn't a command to Anya, but a desperate plea to the universe. The polished steel doors slid open with a soft, expensive sigh. Standing in the doorway was a woman. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with raven black hair cut into a sharp, severe bob, and eyes the color of emeralds. She wore a crimson dress that clung to her like a second skin, a stark, bloody slash of color in the monochrome world of Julian's penthouse. Anya's heart stopped. It had to be her. The mistress. She had come to gloat, to witness the final destruction of the wife to claim her prize. Anya braced herself for the humiliation, the final crushing blow. But the woman's eyes weren't on Anya. They were locked on Julian, and they held no trace of triumph. Her beautiful face was pale. Her hands were trembling, and her emerald eyes were wide with a terror that mirrored the panic on Julian's face. She took a shaky step into the room. "Julian," the woman, said, her voice a ragged whisper that cut through the silence. "It's over. They know. They know everything." Julian stared at her, his mask of control utterly shattered. He looked like a man staring at his own ghost. Anya looked back and forth between her husband and this beautiful, terrified stranger. A cold dread far deeper and more terrifying than the pain of betrayal began to creep up her spine. This wasn't about a simple affair. Julian's strange warning, his panic, this woman's fear, it was all connected to something far bigger. The divorce papers lay on the table, forgotten. The gilded cage had just burst open, but Anya had a sickening feeling that she hadn't been set free. She had just been tossed into the fire. The woman in the crimson dress took another hesitant step into the cavernous living room. Her designer heels, which should have clicked with authority on the polished marble floor, were instead unnervingly silent, as if she were trying to retract her own presence. Anya's mind, still reeling from the whiplash of the divorce demand, struggled to process this new bizarre tableau. The mistress, for who else could she be, wasn't acting like a victor. She was acting like a fugitive. "Isabel, what the hell are you doing here?" Julian finally managed to say, his voice a strangled rasp. He shot a venomous glare at her, a look that was less about a spurned lover and more about a co-conspirator who had broken rank. He moved almost unconsciously to position himself between Isabel and Anya, a futile attempt to control the flow of information. "I tried to call you Isabel," said her voice trembling. She ignored Anya completely, her gaze fixed on Julian's increasingly frantic expression. "Your phone was off. I left a dozen messages with your secretary. I had to come. We don't have any time." "Time for what?" Anya interjected, her voice finding a new steely edge. The initial shock was beginning to curdle into suspicion. "Time to coordinate your stories before you throw me out." Isabel's head snapped towards Anya, and for the first time she seemed to truly see her. There was no malice in her emerald eyes, no smug superiority. Instead, Anya saw a flicker of something that looked unnervingly like pity. It was an expression that infuriated Anya more than any taunt could have. "This has nothing to do with your marriage," Isabel said, with a dismissive wave of her hand that was so absolute it was chilling. That's just Collateral damage. A loose end he was trying to tie up. A loose end. Anya repeated the words, tasting like ash. She looked at Julian, whose face was now a ghastly shade of pale. Is that what I am to you, Julian? A loose end. Shut up! Isabel Julian roared, finally losing the last vestige of his icy control. He lunged towards her, grabbing her arm. You shouldn't be here. We had a plan. The plan is shot to hell. Julian. Isabel wrenched her arm free, her fear momentarily eclipsed by a surge of anger. The plan went up in smoke the moment my brother's name appeared on the SEC's inquiry list this morning. The acronym hung in the air, SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The federal agency that policed Wall Street, the boogeyman of every high-flying financier. It was a name Anya knew from the headlines from the periphery of Julian's world, but it had never felt real, never had any bearing on her curated life. Until now. What SEC inquiry Anya demanded, stepping forward. She was no longer just a passive victim in a domestic drama. She was an unwilling participant in something far more sinister. Julian. What is she talking about? She's talking nonsense. Julian spat, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist 82 floors in the sky. She's hysterical. Her brother made some bad investments, and now she's panicking and trying to drag me into it. He was trying to rebuild his wall of composure, but the cracks were showing. His hands were trembling, and a thin sheen of sweat had broken out on his forehead. Bad investments. Isabel let out a sharp, bitter laugh that held no humor. Is that what you call it? You used him. Julian. You used my family's brokerage firm as a shield. You ran the entire scheme through their accounts. Made them look like the masterminds while you stayed clean. Scheme. The word was a poison dart. Anya's gaze swung back to Julian. His entire empire, his Midas touch, was it all just a trick? A lie, just like their marriage. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice low and threatening as he took a step towards Isabel. And I suggest you leave now before you say something you'll regret. No. Isabel stood her ground, her chin held high. The fear was still there, but it was now bolstered by a desperate, cornered resolve. I'm not taking the fall for you. My brother is not going to prison for you. I loved you, Julian, or I thought I did, but I see what you are now. You don't love anyone. You consume them. You use them up, and then you discard the husk. Her eyes flickered to Anya. She knows. Don't you? Anya thought back. The last 6 months, Julian's increasing secrecy, his late nights at the office, which she had assumed were due to his affair, the strange hushed phone calls he would take in his study, ending them abruptly if she walked in. The way he had systematically isolated her, severing her ties to her old friends. Even discouraging visits from her own family, claiming he wanted to protect her peace and privacy during her pregnancy. It hadn't been about protecting her. It had been about isolating a witness. What scheme, Julian Anya's voice was dangerously quiet. The tears were gone. In their place was a cold, terrifying calm. What did you do? Anya, listen to me, Julian said, turning to her, his voice attempting a gentleness that now sounded grotesque and manipulative. She's a scorned woman. She's trying to ruin me because I ended our affair. It's the oldest story in the book. You're my wife. You're the mother of my child. It's you trying to protect. He was trying to play her to use their shared history and their unborn child as a shield. But the spell was broken. She could see the puppeteer's strings. Protect. She repeated, her voice dripping with scorn. By demanding a divorce an hour ago, by calling me a loose end, you needed to tie up. You weren't trying to protect me. You were trying to cut me loose before the ship sank, weren't you? You wanted to make sure I couldn't claim a single cent of your precious, dirty money when it all came crashing down. The truth of it hit her with the force of a physical blow. The divorce wasn't about his love for Isabel. It was a calculated financial maneuver. A preemptive strike in a war he knew was coming. He was willing to make his own pregnant wife a refugee from his life to save himself. It's called a SPAC, Isabel said. Suddenly, her voice sharp and clear. She was no longer speaking just to Julian, but to Anya, to the room, to the universe. She was confessing. A special purpose acquisition company. It's the cleanest grift on Wall Street right now. Anya had heard Julian talk about SPACs. He'd called them blank check companies, a faster, more efficient way to take a private company, public bypassing the rigorous scrutiny of a traditional IPO. He had launched 3 of them in the last 2 years, raising billions from investors eager to get in on the ground floor of his next big thing. The media had lauded him as an innovator. Your husband, Isabel, continued, her voice gaining a morbid momentum, is a master at selling dreams. He would launch a SPAC, promising to merge it with a revolutionary tech company. The hype alone would send the stock soaring. Investors from massive hedge funds to ordinary people would pour their life savings into it all, based on his reputation. She paused, taking a shaky breath. But there was no company, Anya. There was never any revolutionary tech. It was all smoke and mirrors. A shell game. Julian lunged for her again. You're lying, am I? Isabel sidestepped him, her eyes burning with a righteous fury. Tell her about Project Chimera, Julian. Tell her about the next-gen AI integration platform that was going to change the world. Show her the fancy prospectus, the one with the fabricated data and the photoshopped pictures of a non-existent office in Silicon Valley. She turned back to Anya, her voice dropping. The money from the investors. It wasn't used for acquisitions. It was funneled, laundered through a complex web of offshore accounts and shell corporations, one of which was my brother's unwitting firm. Julian would skim off hundreds of millions, paying off early investors with money from new ones to keep the illusion going. It's a classic Ponzi scheme, Anya just dressed up in a fancy Wall Street suit. And the whole thing is about to collapse. Anya stared at Julian, waiting for him to deny it, to rage, to offer some plausible explanation. But he said nothing. He simply stood there, breathing heavily, the cornered animal, the master of the universe, brought low by a single, unraveling thread. The entire foundation of her life, the penthouse, the clothes, the art, the security was not just built on lies, but on theft, on the stolen dreams and life savings of countless unknown people. She felt a dizzying vertigo, the floor seeming to drop away beneath her. Her hand flew to her stomach, to the one pure thing in this world of deceit. This child, her son or daughter, was heir to a fortune that didn't exist, a legacy of shame. So the divorce. Anya trailed off, the full, monstrous picture becoming clear. The settlement you offered me, that generous trust for our peaceful child. Where was that money coming from, Julian? He finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the dark, terrifying truth. "It's the last of the clean money, isn't it?" she whispered in horror. "The money you had before all this started. You were trying to firewall it, to put it in my name and the baby's name so the SEC couldn't touch it when they came for the rest. You weren't giving me a gift. You were using your pregnant wife and your unborn child as a money mule." The silence that followed was a confession. It was the most damning sound Anya had ever heard. The man she had married was not just a cheat or a liar. He was a predator of the highest order, and he had just tried to make her his final accomplice. The doorbell chimed, not the private elevator this time, but the main service door to the apartment. A loud, insistent official buzzing. It was a sound none of them could ignore. Julian, Isabel, and Anya all froze, their three-person drama instantly rendered insignificant. This was no longer a private implosion. The outside world was knocking. Julian's eyes, wide with terror, met Anya's. The last shred of his bravado was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a man whose time had run out. The buzzing came again, longer this time, more demanding. "Don't answer it," Julian whispered, a desperate, futile command. But Anya was already walking towards the door. The fog of her shock and betrayal was beginning to clear, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She had been a pawn in his game for far too long. The game was over. Her hand closed around the cold steel handle of the door. Whatever was on the other side, it was the beginning of her new reality. She had to face it, for herself and for the child she carried. She pulled the door open. Standing in the hallway were two men in dark, conservative suits. They were nondescript, their faces impassive, but they carried an aura of unshakable authority that made the air in the multi-million-dollar penthouse feel cheap and thin. One of them held up a badge and an official-looking document. Julian Croft, the lead agent, asked, his voice calm and professional, but with an underlying steel that tolerated no argument. His eyes flicked past Anya to where Julian stood frozen in the middle of the living room. "I'm Agent Miller with the FBI. We have a warrant to search these premises." The FBI. The letters seemed to suck all the remaining oxygen out of the room. It was one thing to hear the acronym SEC from a panicked mistress. It was another to see the flesh and blood embodiment of a federal investigation standing on your doorstep. Julian looked as if he had been turned to stone. The blood had drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy grey pallor. He stared at the agents, his mouth slightly agape. The master manipulator suddenly a speechless puppet. Isabel let out a small, choked sob and sank onto one of the ridiculously expensive minimalist sofas, her crimson dress pooling around her like a stain. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by the grim resignation of someone who had pulled the pin on a grenade and was now simply waiting for the blast. Agent Miller and his partner stepped into the apartment, their sensible shoes making solid, real-world sounds on the marble floor. Anya stepped back, a strange sense of detachment washing over her. She was watching a movie of her own life imploding. The agent's eyes swept the room, cataloguing the art, the furniture, the view, not with admiration, but with the cold appraisal of an asset seizure. "We also have a warrant for your arrest." "Mr. Croft." Agent Miller continued in the same dispassionate tone, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "For conspiracy to commit securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering." The words were a death sentence, a formal indictment of everything Isabel had just revealed. The Ponzi scheme project, Chimera. The stolen money, it was all real. And now the consequences were real too. "This is a mistake," Julian finally stammered, his voice weak and unconvincing. "My lawyers, Your lawyers have been notified. Agent Miller cut him off smoothly. They can meet you downtown. Please place your hands behind your back. The sight of Julian Croft, the titan of Wall Street, the man whose confident smirk had sold billions in fraudulent dreams, being handcuffed in his own living room, was surreal. The metallic click of the cuffs locking into place was the final definitive sound of his world ending. He didn't resist. The fight was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed shock. As the second agent began to lead Julian towards the door, Isabel suddenly stood up, her face streaked with tears, but her voice filled with a new urgent terror. "Wait!" she cried out, her voice sharp. "That's not all. That's not the real reason." Agent Miller paused, turning to her with a look of mild professional interest. "The real reason for what, ma'am?" "For the divorce," she said, pointing a trembling finger at Julian. "For why he had to get her out. It's not just about the money. There's something else, something worse." Anya, who had been standing silently by the wall, felt a new wave of ice-cold dread. Worse. What could possibly be worse than a billion-dollar fraud that had ruined countless lives? What was the dark secret that even a massive financial crime was meant to cover up? Julian's head snapped up. He shot a look at Isabel, a look of pure murderous rage mixed with desperate pleading. "Isabel, no. Don't. I have to," she sobbed. "They need to know everything. They need to know why you were so desperate." She turned to the agents, her words tumbling out in a frantic, disjointed rush. "The SPACs. The fraud. That was the end game. But it started somewhere else. It started with his first company, Gen Tech Solutions." Anya vaguely remembered the name. It was the company Julian had founded before they met the one that had given him his initial millions and launched his reputation as a tech prodigy. He had sold it for a massive profit years ago. "What about it?" Agent Miller asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. Gentech's flagship product was a proprietary data encryption software, Isabel explained, her voice gaining clarity as she forced the story out. It was sold to dozens of high-level corporate clients, banks, law firms, private equity funds. They promised impenetrable security. She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto Anya's. The pity was back in her gaze, but now it was deeper, darker, filled with a horror that Anya couldn't yet comprehend. But it wasn't an encryption software, Anya. It was a key. Julian built a back door into the system, a master key that gave him access to everything. For years, he had a live feed into the most sensitive corporate data in the country. Mergers and acquisitions plans, confidential legal strategies, insider trading information. The scale of it was dizzying. Julian hadn't just been a con artist. He had been a digital phantom, a ghost in the machine, systematically stealing the lifeblood of the corporate world. That's how he made his first fortune. Isabel continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. It wasn't genius. It was theft on an industrial scale. He knew which companies were going to be acquired before they did. He knew which stocks would soar and which would plummet. He wasn't predicting the market. He was reading the script. The agents exchanged a look. This was new information. This went beyond the SPACs. This was the origin story of his entire criminal enterprise. But that's still not the secret. Isabel choked out, tears streaming down her face again. That's just more fraud. Then what is it? Anya finally spoke, her voice a hollow echo in the room. She had to know. She had to know the final, terrible truth that was poisoning the very air she breathed. Isabel's gaze was fixed on Anya's pregnant belly. 2 years ago, one of the companies he was spying on, a pharmaceutical firm called Biovance, they were on the verge of a major breakthrough, a revolutionary new gene therapy treatment. But they had a problem. Their final human trials were showing some irregularities, dangerous side effects that they were trying to solve before announcing the drug. Julian was now shaking his head violently, his muffled pleas ignored by the agent holding him. "Don't say it, Isabel. Please." Julian knew the drug was flawed. Isabel forged on her voice, cracking with the weight of her confession. He had access to the raw, hidden data. He knew it was dangerous. But he also knew that if another company acquired Biovance, before the flaws were public, the stock would triple overnight. So he used his insider information. He leaked the news of the potential breakthrough without mentioning the dangerous side effects to a rival corporation. They initiated a hostile takeover, and Julian, having bought millions in Biovance stock beforehand, made a fortune. Over $200 million in a single week. That's insider trading. A huge case, but Agent Miller prompted. But it wasn't just insider trading. Isabel screamed, the sound raw and agonizing. The new company, eager to recoup their investment, rushed the drug to market. They buried the flawed data. They pushed it through a compromised approval process. The drug was called Viridia. Anya's blood ran cold. Viridia. The name was a lightning bolt, a searing brand on her memory. It was prescribed as an advanced fertility treatment. Isabel whispered, her eyes locked on Anya's. For couples who had tried everything else, it was hailed as a miracle drug. Anya's hand, the one not pressed against her stomach, flew to her mouth. No, it couldn't be. The room began to spin. The minimalist grey walls seemed to close in on her. She and Julian had struggled to conceive. For 2 years they had been through a heart-breaking cycle of hope and disappointment. Doctors had found no specific issue, just unexplained infertility. Then a year ago, a new specialist, a top doctor recommended by Julian himself, had suggested a new cutting-edge treatment. A miracle drug from Europe, he had called it. Its name was Viridia. Anya stared at Julian, at the man she had married, the man whose child she was carrying. The man who had looked on with what she thought was shared joy when the pregnancy test finally came back positive. But it hadn't been joy. It had been the culmination of a monstrous plan. The side effects, Anya could barely form the words. Her throat was tight with terror. What were the side effects? Julian finally broke. A guttural, animalistic sob tore from his chest. Anya, I'm sorry. I can fix it. We have money. The best doctors. Isabel gave the final brutal answer, her voice devoid of all emotion, a flat line of horror. It worked. The drug allowed women to conceive. That part was true. But the hidden data from the original trials showed that in nearly 80% of cases, the fetus would develop a rare and fatal neurological disorder. Most didn't survive the 3rd trimester. Those who were born didn't live past their 1st year. The world went silent. The agents, the handcuffs, the penthouse, it all dissolved into an indistinct blur. The only thing that was real was the life kicking inside her. A life she had craved, a life she had celebrated, a life that had been conceived through a monstrous lie, a poison given to her by the man she loved. This was the dark secret. The divorce wasn't about protecting his money. It was about severing all ties before his child was born with the fatal condition he himself had knowingly unleashed upon the world. He wasn't trying to disown a wife. He was trying to outrun a death sentence. He was trying to erase the ultimate evidence of his crime, his own dying child. Anya looked at her husband, the father of her child, the architect of her destruction. He was no longer a man. He was a void, a black hole of greed and ambition that had consumed everything, including the life of his own unborn baby. The strength drained from her legs. The room tilted violently, the glittering view of Central Park spinning into a nauseating vortex. As her knees buckled and the world faded to black, the last thing she heard was the distant hollow sound of her own scream. Anya awoke to a world bleached of all color. The first sensation was not sight, but smell. A sharp, aggressive scent of antiseptic that scoured her nostrils and bore no resemblance to the curated peony and old money fragrance of her former life. The second was sound, the soft, insistent, and terrifyingly rhythmic beep of a machine somewhere to her left. For a fleeting, merciful moment, she was adrift in a sea of disorientation, the horrors of the previous evening feeling like the suffocating remnants of a fever dream. Had it been real? The cold words, the crimson dress, the click of handcuffs. Then, with the force of a physical impact, the memories crashed back in. Viridia. The name detonated in her mind a single word that contained a universe of betrayal. It was the name of the drug, the poison, the monstrous lie she had welcomed into her body. A raw, guttural sob tore itself from her throat, and her hand, trembling uncontrollably, flew to her stomach. The gentle, reassuring swell was still there, a fragile vessel in a venomous sea. Was her baby the one pure thing she had left already a ghost? Easy now, Mrs. Croft. Take a deep breath. A calm, steady voice pierced through the fog of her panic. A woman in navy blue scrubs her face, a welcome portrait of professional kindness, was adjusting the IV drip in Anya's arm. You fainted. We brought you straight to Lenox Hill Hospital. We've been monitoring you and the baby. The baby, Anya's voice was a ragged whisper, a thread of sound in the cavernous silence of her fear. She couldn't bring herself to ask the real question, the one that clawed at the inside of her skull. Is it dying? The nurse's eyes softened with understanding. The baby is fine, she said, her words deliberate and clear. A little stressed when you were brought in, but the heartbeat is strong and steady now. Your own heart rate is elevated, which is understandable. You've had a severe shock. The baby is strong. 4 simple words. They were not a cure, not a promise, but they were a lifeline. In the raging flood of her shattered reality, Anya clung to them as if they were the last solid ground on earth. Her baby was a fighter. It was already more than its father had ever been. I need to see a doctor, Anya managed, pushing herself up slightly. The effort made the room spin. A specialist, not just an OB, a geneticist, someone who understands. I need to know everything. Her voice broke on the last word. She needed to know the shape of the monster she was facing. We've already paged the head of our maternal fetal medicine department, Dr. Elena Ramirez. The nurse reassured her, fluffing a thin pillow behind her head. She's the best. She'll be here to speak with you shortly. For now, just try to breathe. Rest was an impossible luxury. Her mind was a torture chamber, replaying Julian's face, twisting in panic, the cold finality of the FBI agent's voice, and Isabel's horrified confession over and over. The entire architecture of her life, a magnificent structure she had once admired, had been revealed as a criminal enterprise, a house of cards built on stolen dreams. And the final, most intimate, most unspeakable betrayal was swimming in her very womb, conceived from a miracle that was in truth a time bomb. As the nurse left to give her a moment, another figure appeared hesitantly in the doorway. It was Isabel. She had shed the blood-red dress, the armor of Julian's mistress, and now wore a simple, anonymous pair of jeans and a grey sweater. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing the faint purple smudges of exhaustion beneath her eyes. The emerald fire in her irises had been banked, leaving a weary, sorrowful glow. Anya's body tensed. A primal part of her wanted to scream at this woman, the beautiful harbinger of her apocalypse. But the anger felt distant, a secondary emotion, muted by the all-consuming terror of Julian's ultimate sin. Isabel wasn't the enemy. She was just another piece of scorched debris in the blast radius of Julian Croft. "What do you want?" Anya asked, her voice raspy, devoid of accusation, but heavy with exhaustion. I came to see if you were all right," Isabel said, her voice barely a whisper. She hovered by the door, a respectful distance away, as if acknowledging she was trespassing on sacred ground of grief. "And to tell you, I told them everything." Anya remained silent, watching her. "The agents at the penthouse," Isabel clarified, twisting a loose thread on her sweater. "After they took you, I stayed for hours. I told them about Viridia, about the Bio-Vance data, about Julian's back door into Gentech. I gave them the offshore account numbers he'd bragged about, the server locations he thought were hidden. Everything I knew. My brother is working with them too. He's turning over every record from his firm. He's terrified, but he wants to make it right." Why Anya's question was genuine, a flicker of curiosity in the darkness. Why not just disappear? "He would have given you money to run." Isabel finally met her gaze, and Anya saw the profound depth of her self-loathing. Because he was going to let my brother, my family, take the fall for a crime he masterminded. That was the first crack in the fantasy. But the moment I found out about Viridia, the real truth of it, I looked at him, Julian, the man I thought I loved, and I saw a void. It wasn't just greed, Anya. What kind of person knowingly condemns unborn children for profit? It was a level of evil I couldn't comprehend. Her eyes flickered to Anya's stomach. When he told me he was divorcing you, I knew why. He was running from the evidence, from his own child. And I knew you were pregnant, but I didn't know about the drug. Not until my brother's lawyer uncovered the connection. The thought of you, going through the rest of your pregnancy celebrating only to face that. She shook her head, a tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. I couldn't live with myself. I couldn't let you be the last one to know the truth. It was the only thing I could do to claw back a single shred of my own soul. In that moment, Anya saw past the affair, past the label of mistress. She saw another woman who had been utterly conned, another life consumed by Julian's insatiable ego. They were bound by a strange, twisted sisterhood forged in the fires of his spectacular destruction. They've frozen everything. Isabel added her voice, flat and emotionless. Every asset. The penthouse is a federal crime scene. The accounts are locked. The cars, the art, the watches, it's all gone. Evidence in the largest fraud case in a decade. His lawyers are saying the evidence is insurmountable. He'll never see the outside of a prison cell again. Good, a cold, hard part of Anya thought. Let him rot. But the satisfaction was hollow, a fleeting warmth in an Arctic landscape of pain. Julian's imprisonment couldn't reverse time, couldn't purify the poison. The door opened again, and a woman with intelligent, compassionate eyes and an air of calm authority entered the room. Mrs. Croft. I'm Dr. Ramirez. With a final lingering look of profound regret, Isabel quietly slipped out of the room, leaving Anya to face her new reality. The next hour was a clinical, terrifying blur of medical terminology, consent forms, and agonizing questions. Dr. Ramirez was a miracle of empathy and professionalism. She explained the process for an advanced diagnostic amniocentesis, carefully and patiently outlining the procedure, the risks, and the stark reality of the potential results. She didn't offer false hope, only facts. And for that, Anya was grateful. I have to know, Dr. Anya pleaded, her composure finally crumbling under the clinical weight of it all. Whatever it is, I have to know what I'm facing. We will get you answers, Doctor. Ramirez promised, her hand briefly resting on Anya's arm. The simple human touch was grounding. As quickly and as safely as we possibly can. The days that followed were a unique form of purgatory. Anya remained in the hospital, a voluntary prisoner in a sterile white room, while the world outside feasted on the carcass of her old life. The news of Julian's arrest had gone supernova. Wall Street Wunderkind, or Ponzi King, screamed the cable news chyrons. His smug, handsome face was plastered everywhere, the poster boy for catastrophic hubris. The stories detailed the SPAC's fraud in lurid detail, but the darkest secret, the corporate evil of Viridia, remained a tightly sealed component of the federal case, a horror not yet fit for public consumption. Anya refused all visitors, save for her parents, who flew in immediately, their faces etched with a pain that mirrored her own. She hired a team of lawyers, not to fight for a share of Julian's blood money, but to meticulously expunge him from her life. To dissolve the marriage, to legally and financially firewall her child from the toxic Croft name and its indelible legacy of shame. She existed in a state of suspended animation, the week-long wait for the test results stretching into an eternity. She didn't sleep, she merely drifted in and out of consciousness. In her waking hours, she would stare out the window at the city, a city that now seemed alien to her. Every pregnant woman she saw, every baby in a stroller was a stab to the heart. She was suspended between a life that was over and a future that was too terrifying to contemplate. Finally, the day came. Dr. Ramirez entered her room alone, closing the door softly behind her. She held a file, and her expression was calm, professional, and utterly unreadable. Anya's heart began to pound, a frantic, desperate rhythm against her ribs. This was it, the precipice. She gripped her own hands over her belly, a protective gesture that felt painfully inadequate. Dr. Ramirez sat in the chair beside the bed, opened the file but didn't look at it. She looked directly at Anya. We have the results from the full genomic sequencing panel, she said, her voice even. Anya held her breath, bracing for the impact, for the words that would shatter the final fragments of her world. Dr. Ramirez took a slow, deliberate breath. Anya, your baby is perfectly healthy. The words didn't register. They were a language she had forgotten how to speak. Anya just stared at her. her mind a blank slate of incomprehension. What? No. That's not possible. Viridia, the neurological degradation. I know, the doctor said gently, her professional calm finally breaking into a warm, reassuring smile. We read the federal case files your lawyers managed to get unsealed for us. We knew the exact rare genetic markers we were looking for, and they are not there. We ran the test twice to be certain. He is completely, unequivocally unaffected. He. Her mind snagged on the word. He. You're having a son. Anya Dr. Ramirez confirmed, her eyes shining. A healthy baby boy. The dam broke. A sound, a wail that was equal parts grief and joy, tore from deep inside her. It was the sound of a week of terror, of months of unknowing, of a lifetime of betrayal, being washed away by a single miraculous wave of relief. The tears came, then hot and cleansing, pouring down her face as she finally truly let go. But how she sobbed, her body shaking. Isabel said, 80%. 80% is not 100%, the doctor said, softly, her voice thick with emotion. It means 20%, 1 in 5 were spared. It's a game of Russian roulette, played with the most precious stakes imaginable. It's a monstrous, unforgivable gamble. But Anya, you and your son, you won. She won. It wasn't a victory over Julian. It was a victory over fate, over poison, over the darkness that had tried to claim her future. Anya checked out of the hospital the next morning. The world looked different, the colors more vibrant, the air cleaner. The Julian Croft penthouse on Park Avenue was sealed a monument to a dead life. She walked away from it without a backward glance. With a small, life-saving loan from her parents, she found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn's Park Slope. It was a world away from the silent, sterile grandeur she had known. From her window, she saw not a curated park, but a living one. She could hear the joyful shrieks of children playing, the friendly bark of dogs, the distant, reassuring rumble of the F-train. It was the chaotic, beautiful symphony of real life. She spent the final peaceful months of her pregnancy rebuilding. She bought a second-hand crib and painted the nursery a cheerful, sunny yellow. She reconnected with her old circle of wonderfully messy, artistic friends who enveloped her in a cocoon of unconditional love and support, never once mentioning her notorious past. They brought her soup, helped her assemble furniture, and made her laugh, truly laugh for the first time in years. 3 months later, Leo Alexander was born, weighing 7 pounds 2 ounces. He was loud, demanding, and utterly perfect. He had her eyes and a stubborn tuft of dark hair. Holding him for the first time, skin to skin, feeling his tiny, fragile fingers instinctively curl around hers. Anya felt a love so vast and powerful it rearranged her entire universe. This was real wealth. This was a legacy. One rainy afternoon as a 2-week-old, Leo slept soundly on her chest. A news alert popped up on her phone. Julian Croft sentenced. She read that faced with an avalanche of evidence and Isabel's unshakable testimony, he had accepted a plea bargain to avoid having the full horrific details of the Viridia scandal made public in a trial. He was sentenced to 150 years in a federal supermax facility with no possibility of parole. Anya looked down at her sleeping son, his chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. She felt no hatred for Julian, no desire for revenge. She felt nothing at all. He was a ghost, the antagonist of a story that was already over. Her story and Leo's was just beginning. Her life was no longer defined by the man she had lost, but by the son she had almost lost and had miraculously gained. She was not the millionaire's disgraced wife. She was Leo's mother, and in the quiet, sun-drenched world of her small Brooklyn apartment, she was the richest woman in the world. Anya's story is a harrowing journey from a gilded cage to true freedom. It's a reminder that wealth can be a mask for unimaginable darkness, and that true strength isn't found in penthouses or designer clothes, but in the fierce, unyielding power of a mother's love. She lost a life of luxury, but gained a life of purpose, proving that even after the most devastating betrayals, we have the power to rise from the ashes and build a new world for ourselves and for our children. Her story isn't just about the downfall of a wicked man, but the rise of an unbreakable woman. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of drama, resilience, and ultimate justice. Let us know in the comments what you think of Anya's incredible journey.